The alarm clock rang at 4 in the morning. Isabel Montenegro opened her eyes and turned it off, trying not to wake her husband who was sleeping next to her. Ricardo barely moved and mumbled something in his sleep. She carefully slipped out from under the blanket, tiptoed into the bathroom, and turned on the dim light. Her morning ritual had been honed by years of working for the airline. Contrasting shower, light makeup, perfectly styled hair gathered in a flawless bun. The uniform dress was fitted, the dark blue fabric flowing down her figure, the snow-white collar impeccably ironed, the neckerchief tied in an elegant knot. Isabel scrutinized her reflection, adjusted her name badge, and smiled to herself. In the kitchen, she habitually turned on the coffee maker. While the coffee was brewing, she pulled out a pre-prepared lunchbox with a sandwich and fruit. The quiet noise of the coffee machine diluted the pre-dawn silence of the apartment. Isabel loved these quiet moments before the workday began, when the rest of the world was still asleep and she was getting ready to take to the skies. "Are you leaving already?" Ricardo's sleepy voice caught her off guard. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you," Isabel whispered, turning to her husband. "I have a long flight. I need to be at the airport early." Ricardo walked over, hugged her from behind, and kissed her neck. "Have a safe flight, my love. I'll be waiting for your return." She smiled, savoring the warmth of his embrace. Even after 8 years of marriage, these moments were special. Finishing her coffee, Isabel kissed her husband goodbye and walked out into the cool morning. A cab was already waiting at the driveway. The driver, familiar to her from her many morning trips, nodded affably and helped her stow her suitcase in the trunk. The city was still asleep, and the drive to the airport took only 20 minutes. There was the usual bustle of activity in the staff terminal. Isabel walked through the staff entrance, showing her pass to the guard, and made her way to the crew briefing room. Along the way, she met Sofia Navarro, a senior flight attendant and her longtime friend. "Good morning. Ready for your European adventure?" Sofia smiled welcomingly, fixing her flawless makeup. "Always ready," Isabel replied, hugging her friend. "Is Victoria here yet?" "Late as usual," Sofia rolled her eyes. "But we still have time before the briefing." They entered a bright room where the other crew members were already gathered. Mauricio Fuentes, the first pilot, was standing at the blackboard studying the weather reports. He turned around at the sound of the door opening and nodded to Isabel, his brown eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. "Good morning, ladies," he said in his deep voice. "The weather favors us. No turbulence is expected." At that moment, a panting Victoria Espinosa flew into the room, adjusting her uniform as she went. "Sorry I'm late. My alarm clock let me down." As always, Sofia grinned good-naturedly, but there was a stern note in her voice. The briefing was clear and to the point. Mauricio outlined the route, weather conditions, and technical details. Sofia assigned duties to the stewardesses and the team went to pre-flight preparations. Isabel methodically checked her section of the cabin: emergency equipment, the presence of all necessary items, the condition of the seats. The work was soothing. Every action was automatic, but she never allowed herself to relax. The safety of the passengers depended on her attentiveness. Soon the first passengers began to arrive. Isabel greeted them with a professional smile, helped them place their hand luggage, and answered their questions. She loved this moment, the beginning of a new journey, when people's eyes read the anticipation of the flight. The airplane was almost full when the first incident of the day occurred. An elderly man in business class suddenly turned pale and clutched his chest. Isabel reacted instantly. Within seconds, she was by the passenger's side. "Sir, are you not feeling well?" she asked, taking a seat next to the chair. "Let me help you." With a professional eye, she assessed the passenger's condition: pallor, sweat on his forehead, rapid breathing. Victoria was already rushing over with a first aid kit. "Do you have any medication with you? Are you taking anything for your heart?" Isabel spoke calmly and confidently, her presence reassuring the elderly passenger's anxious neighbors. The man nodded and with trembling hands pulled a packet of pills from his jacket pocket. Isabel helped him take the medicine and checked his pulse and breathing. After a few minutes, color began to return to his face. "Thank you," he said. "I apologize for the inconvenience." "Don't apologize, it's my job," Isabel replied softly. "I'll be checking on your well-being during the flight. If you feel unwell, let me know right away." Sophia, who had been observing the situation, nodded approvingly. Isabel returned to her duties, but continued to watch the elderly passenger with the corner of her eye. Finally, the formalities were completed, the doors closed, and Commander Fuentes began to taxi the plane onto the runway. Isabel took her seat for takeoff, feeling a familiar excitement. No matter how many times she took to the skies, each takeoff was special. The airplane gained altitude and work began to boil over. Isabel methodically moved around the cabin with a cart, delivering drinks and snacks. She remembered the preferences of the regular passengers, had time to exchange a few words with anyone who was looking for companionship, and discreetly monitored the condition of an elderly passenger. In the brief moments of respite, she exchanged glances with Sophia and Victoria. Their coordinated work was like a polished dance. Each knew her place and her duties. Mauricio occasionally communicated with the cabin, his calm voice on the speakerphone instilling confidence in the passengers. The day was just beginning, but Isabel already sensed that this flight was going to be special. She couldn't explain why, just an intuition developed from years in the sky. It was going to be a long flight across the ocean, and she was prepared for anything that might happen along the way. The plane landed at the Paris airport right on schedule. Isabel watched the last passengers leave as they said goodbye to the crew. An elderly man who had felt ill on takeoff lingered at the gate. "Thank you for your concern," he pronounced, shaking Isabel's hand. "You're a true professional." She smiled modestly back. "Take care of yourself." After all the passengers had left the plane, the usual post-flight procedures began. Isabel methodically checked the cabin, collecting forgotten items and tidying up each row. Sophia was doing paperwork, and Victoria was helping the flight attendants from the catering service change the food and beverage supplies. "Tired?" Sophia approached Isabel, who was folding a found baby sweater into a bag for forgotten items. "The very least," Isabel replied, stretching out. "But it was a nice flight today." "Yeah, a smooth one. Except for that incident on takeoff." Sophia lowered her voice. "By the way, did you notice the way Mauricio looked at you when you were helping that passenger?" Isabel frowned. "Sophia, stop it. We've already discussed this." "I'm just stating a fact," Sophia shrugged. "He clearly has a thing for you." "I have a husband I love," Isabel replied firmly, zipping up her bag of forgotten items. At that moment, Mauricio entered the salon, removing his uniform tie as he walked. "Ladies, the bus to the hotel will be here in 20 minutes. Don't be long." Isabel felt his scrutinizing gaze on her, but pretended to be busy checking the inventory list. Sophia hummed meaningfully and went to gather her things. At the hotel, the crew was housed on one floor. Isabel walked into her room, kicked off her shoes, and dropped into a soft chair. Despite her fatigue, she loved these short stops in different cities around the world. Each such break between flights was like a little adventure. After showering and changing into comfortable clothes, she pulled out her phone. 2 missed texts from Ricardo and a message. "Hope the flight went well. Love you." Isabel smiled and dialed her husband's number. "Hello, darling," she uttered when Ricardo answered. "I'm already at the hotel. How was the flight?" You could hear the genuine concern in his voice. "It's fine. There was a small incident with a passenger, but we got through it," Isabel explained the incident. "I have you down as a true professional." Ricardo sounded proud in his voice. What are you planning to do tonight? Sophia suggested we all have dinner together at the hotel restaurant. I think I'll take it. I'm too tired to go out. After talking to her husband, Isabel changed into a simple black dress and went down to the restaurant. Almost all of the crew were already gathered there. Sophia waved at her, beckoning her over to her table where she, Victoria, and Mauricio were seated. Here comes our heroine, Victoria smiled, pulling back a chair for Isabel. Stop it, Isabel said, embarrassed. I was just doing my job. Dinner passed in a warm, almost familial atmosphere. They discussed amusing case studies, shared passenger stories, and made plans for the next day. Mauricio talked about his experience of flying in difficult weather conditions, and everyone listened with interest. You know, he said, looking into his wine glass, sometimes I think we're like a little family, spending more time together than we do with our relatives. That's for sure, Sophia agreed, especially on long voyages. Isabel listened to their conversation in silence, reflecting on her life. Indeed, work occupied a huge portion of her time, but she had never regretted her choice of profession. Even Ricardo, for all his busyness at the airport, understood and supported her passion for the sky. After dinner, Sophia suggested a walk through the evening city, but Isabel refused, citing fatigue. She went up to her room and sat by the window with a cup of tea. The lights of Paris twinkled in the darkness, creating an almost magical atmosphere. A knock on the door interrupted her musings. Sophia stood on the doorstep with a bag of fresh pastries. Thought you could use some company and some sweets. Isabel let her friend in and they settled into the chairs. Sophia looked at her carefully. How are you really? I can see that something is troubling you. I'm fine, Isabel replied automatically, but gave up under her friend's gaze. It's just, sometimes I feel like I don't spend enough time with my family. Ricardo never complains, but you feel guilty? Sophia finished softly. Look, you're a wonderful wife and a professional at what you do. You don't need to berate yourself for loving your job. They talked for another hour, discussing family life, work, and future plans. Sophia talked about her recent divorce and how work helped her through that period. The main thing is to be honest with yourself, she said in parting, and to remember that you always have support. Left alone, Isabel began to get ready for bed. There was a return flight tomorrow and a good night's rest was needed. She set her alarm clock and sent Ricardo a text message saying good night. The morning started habitually early. The crew gathered for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Victoria was late as usual, but this time only 5 minutes late. Mauricio was discussing the weather forecast for the return trip with the co-pilot. A little turbulence over the Atlantic is expected, he reported as Isabel joined their table. Nothing serious, but we'll have to be more careful. They drove to the airport with time to spare. Pre-flight preparations went without incident, and soon the first passengers began to arrive. Isabel felt rested and ready for a new day of work. The plane took off right on schedule. Looking out the window at Paris, Isabel thought about how lucky she was to have a job and co-workers. Ahead of her was a long flight home, where her beloved husband was waiting for her. Life seemed wonderful and right. The airplane landed softly at the Santiago airport. Isabel felt pleasantly tired after the long flight. The last passengers were leaving the board, bidding farewell to the crew. She smiled habitually and wished everyone a good day, mentally already imagining meeting Ricardo. See you in 2 days, Sophia said goodbye as she gathered her things. Get some proper rest. You too, Isabel hugged her friend. Thanks for the talk yesterday. Victoria, walking by, winked. Say hi to your handsome husband. Mauricio lingered in the cockpit longer than usual, filling out flight documentation. As Isabel walked by, he looked up from the paperwork. Great job today, especially with that family with the little kid. Thank you, Commander, she smiled. See you on the next flight. Exiting the terminal through the service entrance, Isabel headed toward the security office. Her heart beat faster as she approached the familiar door. Knocking, she peeked inside. Ricardo was sitting at his desk, absorbed in his work. When he heard the knock, he looked up and his face lit up with a smile. "My birdie is back!" He got up from his desk and was at her side in 2 steps, wrapping her in a tight embrace. He smelled of his favorite perfume and coffee. Isabel closed her eyes, savoring the moment. "I missed you," Ricardo whispered, kissing the top of her head. "How was the flight?" "It was fine." She pulled away to look into his eyes. "Tired a little, but happy to be home." Ricardo picked up her bag. "I still have an hour of work left. Will you sit with me, or are you going home to rest?" "I'll sit with you." Isabel made herself comfortable in the visitor's chair. "Tell me, what's new with you?" Ricardo returned to his desk and began to recount the recent events at the airport. Isabel listened to his deep voice, watching him gesticulate as he explained some technical details. At one point his cell phone rang and he quickly dropped the call without even glancing at the screen. "Important call?" Isabel inquired. "No, probably an advertisement," he replied carelessly, returning to the conversation. "So, about the new security system." An hour later they emerged into the parking lot. The evening sun was coloring the sky in soft pink tones. Ricardo opened the car door for Isabel. "I made reservations at La Piazza. Remember where we celebrated your promotion?" "Of course I remember," she smiled. "Just let me change first." At home, Isabel took a quick shower and changed into her favorite dark green dress. Ricardo was waiting for her in the living room, leafing through some documents on a tablet. Noticing his wife, he set the tablet aside and whistled, "You're beautiful." The restaurant greeted them with dim lights and soft music. Their table was by the window with a view of the evening city. The waiter brought a menu and a bottle of their favorite wine. "To your return," Ricardo raised his glass. "To us," Isabel replied, clinking her glass with his. They ordered their favorite dishes, salmon with vegetables for her, steak for him. The conversation flowed casually. They discussed work, weekend plans, the latest news. Isabel told about the incident with the elderly passenger, about the conversation with Sophia, about the beauty of Paris at night. "And what's new at work?" she asked when dessert arrived. "Besides the new security system?" "Not much," Ricardo shrugged. "Just the usual routine, although—" he hesitated for a second. "There's a vacation idea. Maybe we could go somewhere next month." "That would be great," Isabel said excitedly. "Where do you want to go?" "We'll think about that tomorrow," he smiled. "Tonight I just want to enjoy the evening with you." After dinner, they decided to walk. The evening was warm and there were still plenty of people on the city streets. Ricardo held Isabel's hand, occasionally stopping to kiss her. It was just like the first days of their acquaintance. At home, they settled on the couch with glasses of wine. Ricardo put on some music, their favorite jazz. Isabel leaned against his shoulder, feeling completely happy. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes I think I'm the luckiest woman in the world." Ricardo hugged her tighter but didn't say anything back. His phone rang again, and this time he didn't even reach for it. Isabel noticed him frowning as he looked at the screen but decided not to pay any attention to it. They sat there for a long time, talking about little things, making plans for the future. Ricardo told funny stories about his subordinates. Isabel shared her impressions about different countries she had been to. Toward midnight, they went to bed. Isabel was about to fall asleep when she heard Ricardo quietly get up and leave the bedroom. Through her slumber, she could hear his muffled voice. It sounded like he was talking to someone on the phone. But fatigue took its toll, and she fell into a deep sleep. Isabel woke late in the morning, the first time in many days that she could take her time. Ricardo was gone, but breakfast was waiting for her in the kitchen, along with a note. "I had to leave on urgent business. I'll be back for lunch. Love you. She ate her breakfast leisurely, enjoying the silence and the opportunity to be in no hurry. Ricardo's tablet from yesterday was on the table, and when she accidentally touched the screen, it came to life, showing an open messaging app. Isabel quickly turned away. She never read other people's correspondence, not even her husband's. The day promised to be quiet. She had 2 days off before her next flight, and she planned to spend them at home doing simple household chores. Such moments of normalcy were especially precious after long flights. Ricardo arrived home closer to evening, not at lunchtime as promised. He smelled of an unfamiliar perfume, but Isabel put it down to a business meeting. There were few people to talk to on the job. He looked tired and a little distracted. "Sorry for the delay," he said, kissing her cheek. "The meeting ran long." "That's okay," Isabel replied, setting the table. "I made your favorite soup." At dinner, Ricardo was unaccustomedly silent, listening more than speaking. Isabel talked about her plans for tomorrow, meeting her friends, going to the beauty parlor, buying a new uniform. "By the way," he suddenly perked up, "I can stay late tomorrow. I have to meet with representatives of the new security service." "Another meeting?" Isabel tried to make the question sound as casual as possible. "Yes, it's a lot of work." He jabbed at his phone, which vibrated again. After dinner, they settled in front of the television. Ricardo read something on his tablet, occasionally frowning and typing answers quickly. Isabel tried to concentrate on the movie, but her thoughts kept returning to her husband's strange behavior. The evening passed quietly. Ricardo went to bed early, citing fatigue. Isabel sat in the living room for a while, listening to the sounds in the apartment. Her husband's muffled voice came from the bedroom. He was on the phone again. The next morning began with a message from Sofia. "Meet me at 12 at Café Verde." Isabel said yes and headed for the shower. Ricardo had already left for work, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "I'll be late. Don't wait up with dinner." Sofia and Victoria were waiting for her at the cafe. The friends were sitting at a table in the corner, talking animatedly about something. At the sight of Isabel, they were strangely quiet. "What's wrong?" Isabel asked, taking a seat. "Nothing much," Victoria replied a little too quickly. "Just discussing airport news." Sofia threw Victoria a warning glance. "How was your weekend? Getting any rest?" "Yes, although Ricardo is at work all the time." Isabel noticed her friends glance over at each other. "What? Do you know something?" No, Sofia replied hastily. "It's just, you know what everyone's workload is like at the airport right now." The conversation turned to discussing upcoming flights and the latest airline news. Victoria talked about her new suitor. Sofia shared her vacation plans. But Isabel had the feeling that her friends were not telling her something. After the cafe, Isabel went to the beauty parlor. While the master was working on her hair, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number calling. "Hello?" she answered. There was silence, then a short beep. Isabel frowned. This was the third such call in recent days. From the salon, she drove to the uniform store. While trying on a new suit, she heard two stewardesses talking in a nearby fitting room. "Have you heard about the new girl? They say she's having an affair with some big security chief." "Hush, you! Everyone knows about it, but no one's talking about it." Isabel froze. Her heart raced faster, but she forced herself to calm down. Aren't there a lot of bosses in security? And aren't there enough gossip floating around the airport? That evening she sat at home alone. Ricardo was late, as promised. Isabel tried to read a book, but she couldn't concentrate. Her mind was reeling with scraps of conversation, strange looks from her friends, and her husband's unusual behavior. Ricardo returned at midnight. He smelled of alcohol and the same unfamiliar perfume. "Sorry, honey," he murmured, kissing her cheek. "Had to celebrate the signing of the contract." "It's okay," she replied, trying not to give away her anxiety. "Did you have dinner?" "Yeah, no worries." He headed for the bathroom. Big day tomorrow. Need to get some sleep. Lying in bed, Isabel listened to the sound of the water in the bathtub. Ricardo was humming something. He always got musical after a couple glasses of wine, but today his merriment seemed unnatural. The next morning began with a text from Sophia. "We need to talk. It's important." Isabel was about to reply, but at that moment Ricardo entered the bedroom. "Good morning, little birdie." He looked unaccustomedly chipper for a man who had returned late from a business meeting. "I'll be leaving early today. Lots of work to do." "Sure," Isabel nodded, watching him get ready. "I have business in town, too." Ricardo was already dressed when his phone rang. He quickly glanced at the screen and dropped the call. "Who is it?" Isabel asked, trying to keep her voice sounding indifferent. "Eh? No one. Just a commercial." He hastily slipped the phone into his pocket. "Okay, I'm going to run. Love you." Isabel sat on the bed for a while longer, looking at the door that closed behind her husband. Something was definitely wrong. All these strange calls, the late returns, the unusual behavior of her friends. She stood up and walked to the window. In the parking lot, Ricardo was getting into his car. Before moving off, he pulled out his cell phone and called someone. Even from this distance, you could see how his face had changed. It was as if it had lit up from within. The day of the new flight started as usual. Isabel woke up 3 hours before the flight, trying not to wake Ricardo. He stirred in his sleep and mumbled something unintelligible, someone's name, I think. She froze, listening, but her husband was sound asleep again. In the bathroom, Isabel did the usual routine: washing, makeup, styling. Her hands did everything automatically while her thoughts wandered around the oddities of the last few days. Yesterday's meeting with Sophia had not taken place. Her friend had suddenly canceled it, citing urgent matters. In the kitchen, she found that the coffee had run out. As she opened the cupboard to find a new pack, Isabel accidentally touched a stack of papers. Restaurant bills and store receipts fell onto the countertop. One check caught her eye: a dinner for two at an expensive restaurant, dated the day Ricardo was supposedly in a meeting. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Ricardo had gotten up earlier than usual. "Good morning, little birdie," he kissed her cheek. "Thought I'd walk you out today." Isabel hastily collected the checks and tucked them back into the closet. "Shouldn't have gotten up so early." "Anything for you," he smiled, but his eyes avoided her gaze. In the cab on the way to the airport, they were silent. Ricardo kept checking his phone even though it was too early for work messages. Isabel pretended not to notice him covering the screen with his hand. At the terminal, their paths diverged. Ricardo headed to his office and Isabel went to the pre-flight briefing. In the break room, she met Victoria, who looked unaccustomedly serious. "How's it going?" Isabel asked, changing into her uniform. "Fine." Victoria was clearly nervous. "Listen, are you okay?" "Why wouldn't I be okay?" "No, nothing. Just asking." Victoria hastily turned away to her locker. At the briefing, Isabel noticed the other stewardesses whispering, casting odd glances at her. Even Mauricio, usually calm and focused, seemed somehow tense. Sophia was late. It wasn't like her. When she finally appeared, her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Sorry I'm late," she mumbled as she took her seat. "Traffic." Isabel knew Sophia lived a 5-minute walk from the airport. The pre-flight training had a strange atmosphere. Usually the team talked a lot, joked around, exchanged news. Today everyone was unusually silent. When Isabel passed a group of flight attendants, they abruptly stopped talking. In the first-class cabin, she bumped into an unfamiliar flight attendant from another shift, a tall blonde with perfect makeup. "Oh, I'm sorry," the latter said with feigned politeness. "You must be Isabel? I've heard so much about you." Something in her tone made Isabel wary. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but—" The stewardess smiled meaningfully. We'll get to know each other soon. Just before the flight, Isabel saw Sophia talking to Mauricio at the far end of the cabin. They were talking quietly but very emotionally. Noticing Isabel approaching, both abruptly fell silent. "What's going on?" Isabel asked bluntly. "Nothing," Mauricio replied a little too quickly. "We were discussing the route." Time to finish the pre-flight check. Sophia hurriedly left. Takeoff went normally, but as soon as the plane gained altitude, Isabel felt the atmosphere in the cabin change. Her colleagues tried not to be alone with her, talking only about work matters. In the crew lounge, Isabel tried to gather her thoughts. The phone in her pocket vibrated, a message from Ricardo. "Have a good flight, my love. I'll be late for work today." She opened the gallery on her phone, their photos together, happy moments, travels. In the last selfies, taken a week ago, Ricardo was smiling with his arm around her shoulders. But now, Isabel noticed something she hadn't seen before, the tense wrinkles around his eyes, the unnaturalness of his posture as if he were uncomfortable. Victoria looked into the lounge. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. Did you want something?" Isabel looked up from the phone. Victoria was shuffling from foot to foot. "No, I mean yes. Isabel, there's something I need to tell you." At that moment, Mauricio's voice came over the speakerphone, warning of an area of turbulence. Victoria flinched and hurried out of the room. The rest of the flight passed like a blur. Isabel mechanically performed her duties, smiling at passengers, answering questions. But her whole being was focused on one thought, that everyone around her knew something important, something concerning her life, but they were silent. Before boarding, Sophia tried to speak to her. "Isabel, listen. If you're my friend," Isabel interrupted her, "tell me straight what's going on." Sophia turned pale. "I can't. Not here. Not now." When the plane landed, Isabel was the first to exit the cabin. She saw Ricardo in the terminal. He was standing at the exit of the service area, talking on the phone. Noticing his wife, he quickly ended the conversation and hid the phone. "Thought I'd meet you," he smiled. "Missed you." "I thought you'd be late for work." Isabel looked at her husband carefully. "Got off early." He picked up her bag. "Shall we go home?" On their way to the parking lot, they met the same unfamiliar stewardess from first class. She waved hello. "Good evening, Ricardo." Isabel felt her husband tense up. His hand that held her bag shook faintly. "Good evening," he replied dryly and pulled Isabel toward the exit. "Have you met her?" Isabel asked as they got into the car. So, casually, Ricardo started the engine. "Seen her a couple times at security meetings." All the way home, they were silent. Isabel looked out the window, going over the events of the last few days in her mind. Strange calls, inexplicable behavior of her colleagues, her husband's tension, receipts from the restaurant. In the evening, lying in bed, she heard Ricardo talking on the phone again in the other room. His voice was quiet but happy, the way he used to talk to her. Isabel closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind reeled with scraps of phrases, glances, misunderstandings. She knew it would all clear up soon, but was she ready for the truth? The invitation to the airline's anniversary had been on her desk for a week. Gold letters on heavy white cardboard promised a grand celebration of the company's 25th anniversary at the best hotel in town. Isabel absent-mindedly ran her finger over the embossed letters, pondering what to wear. "Are you going to wear that black dress with the open back?" Ricardo appeared in the bedroom doorway, tying his tie. "You look stunning in it." "You think so?" Isabel opened her closet, looking through the evening gowns. "Maybe blue would be better?" "Suit yourself, sweetheart." He walked over and hugged her from behind. "You'll be the prettiest in anything." He smelled like a new perfume. She'd never smelled that scent before. Isabel gently released herself from the embrace, pretending to look for her shoes. 3 hours before the event, she began to get ready. She chose a black dress after all. It really suited her best. She spent a long time styling her hair, carefully applying makeup. Sophia sent a message. "See you at the party. We need to talk." Ricardo was waiting in the living room checking something on his phone. When he saw his wife, he whistled. "You look amazing." Dozens of guests had already gathered at the Grand Palace Hotel. The luxurious banquet hall shone with crystal chandeliers. Waiters glided between the guests with trays of champagne. Isabel immediately spotted Sophia standing at the column, talking to Mauricio. "I'm going to go say hello to my superiors." Ricardo stepped away, leaving Isabel alone. Sophia immediately made her way over to her friend. "You look beautiful." She nervously rubbed the bracelet on her wrist. "Listen, I have to—" "Good evening, ladies." Victoria interrupted them, appearing out of nowhere. "It's a terrific party, isn't it?" Isabel noticed Sophia shake her head imperceptibly as she looked at Victoria. The latter mumbled something about needing to find someone. The orchestra played a slow tune. Couples began to walk out onto the dance floor. Ricardo returned and asked Isabel to dance. She put her hand on his shoulder, feeling his muscles tense. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "Sure," he smiled, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. "Just tired a little." As they danced, Isabel spotted the tall blonde. She was standing at the bar in a tight red dress, talking to someone in the company's management. An expensive necklace glittered around her neck. After the dance, Ricardo disappeared again, now to talk to colleagues. Isabel stayed with Sophia, who was still hesitant to start an important conversation. They stood at the buffet table, pretending to look at the appetizers. "That seafood over there is stale," came a familiar voice. It was the blonde woman at the bar. "I wouldn't recommend it. I'm Catalina, by the way." "We met on the airplane," Isabel replied coldly. "Yeah, right," Catalina smiled, showing perfect teeth. "How small the world of aviation is, isn't it?" At that moment, the beginning of the official part was announced. All the guests gathered around the stage where the company executives began to deliver their ceremonial speeches. Isabel looked for her husband with her eyes, but he was nowhere to be seen. The president of the company was just talking about the achievements of the last year when she noticed a movement in the far corner of the hall. Ricardo was standing there, holding a small gift box. Catalina stealthily approached him. Isabel saw her husband look around and then quickly hand the box to Catalina. She opened it right there and a bright smile appeared on her face. She whispered something in Ricardo's ear, and he smiled back, the same warm smile that had previously been reserved for Isabel. "Please raise your glasses to the prosperity of our company." The president's voice interrupted her observations. Everyone raised their champagne glasses. Isabel automatically took a sip, unable to taste it. Sophia beside her turned pale and squeezed her hand tightly. After the formal part, the dancing began. Ricardo turned back to his wife as if nothing had happened. "Do you want to dance?" "No." Her voice sounded sharper than she intended. "What was that box?" Ricardo froze for a moment. "What box?" "The one you gave to Catalina." "Oh, that." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that only appeared when he was nervous. "Just a gift from co-workers. It was her birthday recently." "Really?" Isabel stared at her husband. "And all the co-workers chipped in?" "Yes, of course." He looked around. "Excuse me, I need to talk to the head of security." Isabel was left alone, watching Catalina flit between the guests, occasionally glancing in Ricardo's direction. Sophia walked over to her friend. "Why don't we go out on the terrace? You need some fresh air." It was cool on the terrace. Isabel leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights of the city. "You know something, Sophia. Please tell me the truth." Sophia was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "I can't. He has to do it himself." "How long ago?" Isabel turned to her friend. What? How long has everyone known? How long have you known? Sophia lowered her eyes. A few months. At first there were only rumors. At that moment Catalina came out onto the terrace. When she saw them she pretended that she had just stepped out to get some air, but Isabel could see her defiantly adjusting something on her finger. Back in the hall, Isabel headed straight for the bar. She needed a drink to deal with her emotions. Mauricio, noticing her condition, approached. Do you need a ride home? No thanks, she shook her head. I'm with my husband. Pronouncing the word husband, she felt a bitterness in her mouth. Ricardo was standing at the other end of the hall at this moment, talking to a group of co-workers. Catalina casually walked past him every few minutes. The rest of the evening passed like a blur. Isabel smiled mechanically, answered questions, even danced with some of her husband's colleagues. But her gaze kept returning to Catalina, who now made no secret of her triumph. In the cab on the way home, they were silent. Ricardo tried to take her hand, but she pulled away, pretending to adjust her dress. It was a nice evening, he finally said. Isabel remained silent. She thought about the small gift box and what might have been inside. Something told her it wasn't just a birthday present from her co-workers. At home, she went straight to the bedroom, citing a headache. Ricardo walked around the apartment for a while, then quietly went out to the balcony to talk on the phone. Lying in the dark, Isabel replayed the events of the evening in her head. She had an early flight tomorrow, the one where she would see something that would change everything forever. But she didn't know that yet. Lying awake, listening to her husband whisper soft words to someone behind the closed balcony door. The morning after the corporate party was a rough one. Isabel woke up before her alarm clock, feeling wrecked, even though she hadn't had much to drink the night before. Ricardo was still asleep, his breathing even and calm, as if he hadn't been the one whispering with someone on the balcony late last night. When she came out of the bathroom, Ricardo was already awake and making coffee in the kitchen. He looked alert and somehow enthusiastic, as if last night hadn't bothered him in the slightest. Good morning, little birdie. He handed her a cup of freshly brewed coffee. How did you sleep? Fine, she lied, accepting the cup. Ricardo, we need to talk. He tensed, but quickly pulled himself together. Sure. About what? About last night's gift. Isabel watched his reaction carefully. Why didn't you tell me you were going to give something to your new employee? I explained. It was just a birthday present from co-workers. He turned away from the coffee machine. Nothing special. And how many co-workers chipped in? The whole department. He pulled out a second cup. Look, I don't understand why this bothers you so much. Because you've never participated in a collective gift like this before. Isabel set the cup on the table. And because you handed it over secretly, thinking no one could see. Ricardo turned slowly toward her. Were you following me? No, I just happened to see it. She looked him straight in the eye. And I also saw her smiling at you, not as a co-worker. Stop it. His voice became hard. You're making up things that aren't there. Really? Isabel felt her voice shake. Then explain those late-night phone calls, and the late returns from work, and the new perfume. I have a lot of work to do right now. Important project. He picked up his briefcase. I should get going. We'll talk tonight. I have a flight, she reminded him. I'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, then. He gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and walked out of the kitchen. Isabel heard the front door slam. She slowly lowered herself into a chair, looking into an untouched cup of coffee. Ricardo's forgotten cell phone lay on the table. He had never forgotten it at home before. There was the usual morning bustle at the airport. Sophia met her at the entrance to the briefing room. How are you? Fine. Isabel adjusted her uniform. Where are the others? They'll be right with you. Victoria was the last to appear, late as always. She looked flustered and kept glancing at her watch. Mauricio gave the briefing quickly and substantively, though Isabel noticed he avoided looking in her direction. Everyone worked in silence during pre-flight preparations, breaking the silence only when necessary. Passengers began to arrive and Isabel fell into her usual routine. She helped place carry-on luggage, answered questions, checked seat belts. It was business as usual, except there was an emptiness inside. Just before takeoff, a panting Catalina appeared in the first-class cabin. She wasn't a member of the crew on this flight, but she walked confidently down the aisle, stopping at the seat of one of the passengers. "Just wanted to make sure you were comfortable," she said loud enough for Isabel to hear, and then she saw it. A ring glinted on Catalina's impeccably manicured hand. The same ring that Isabel had known since she was a child. It was antique, with a large sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, a family heirloom given to her by her grandmother before she died. Isabel felt the ground go from under her feet. Sophia, noticing her condition, quickly walked over and took her under her arm. "Are you not feeling well?" Catalina, walking past them toward the exit, accidentally grazed Isabel's shoulder. The ring glinted again, now right in front of her eyes, as if mocking her. "Sorry," Catalina smiled sweetly. "It's so crowded in the aisle." Isabel stared after her, unable to move. The only thought swirling in her head was how. How did this ring, kept in their bedroom in a special box, end up on this woman's finger? "Isabel," Sophia's voice sounded as if from far away. "Maybe you shouldn't fly tonight." "No," she straightened. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. The entire flight she moved like an automaton, performing familiar actions on autopilot. Memories flashed through her mind, her grandmother handing her the ring, telling its story, the first time she'd worn it for an important event, how Ricardo had admired it when they'd first started dating. During the short break, she checked her phone, no messages from her husband. Of course he'd left his phone at home, or had he left it behind on purpose? Maybe there were messages on there that he didn't want her to see. Sophia had tried to talk to her several times during the flight, but Isabel had brushed off all attempts to start a conversation. She wasn't ready to hear what her friend wanted to tell her. Not now, with her grandmother's ring on her husband's mistress's finger still in front of her eyes. Mauricio had noticed her condition, too. During one of the salon inspections, he stopped beside her. "If you need help, just say the word." She shook her head, unable to utter a word. Help? What kind of help could make up for her husband giving her most treasured family heirloom to another woman? By the end of the flight, Isabel had made a decision. As soon as they landed, she would go home and check the box. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe it was just a similar ring. There had to be some explanation. But deep down, she already knew the truth. She knew exactly what was in that gift box at the corporate party. She knew why everyone was looking at her with pity. Knew why Ricardo had avoided making eye contact with her lately. When the plane landed, she was the first one out of the cabin without even saying goodbye to her coworkers. In the cab, she gave her home address, the first time she hadn't stopped by her husband's office after a flight. In the elevator, she pulled out her keys, and her hands were shaking so badly that she didn't immediately get into the keyhole. Entering the apartment, she went straight to the bedroom, to the dresser where the cherished box was kept. The box was in its place. Isabel slowly opened it, already knowing what she would see inside. The velvet cushion where the ring should have rested was empty. The empty velvet cushion in the box seemed to scream of loss. Isabel slowly ran her fingers over the recess where the ring used to lie. In the evenings, before going to bed, she would open the box, admiring the play of light on the facets of the stones. How had she not noticed the ring's disappearance before? She remembered the last time she had held the ring in her hands 3 weeks ago, before an important meeting at the airline. She'd decided not to wear it then for fear of losing it during a long day at work. And since then she'd been so busy with flights that she hadn't even opened the box. Isabel sank to the edge of the bed, still holding the empty box in her hands. On the inside of the lid was a faded photograph, her grandmother as a young woman with this very ring on her finger, an elegant woman with a straight back and a proud look. "I'm sorry, grandmother," Isabel whispered, running her finger over the photograph. Memories came in a wave. Here was her grandmother telling the story of the ring. It had been passed down in their family from generation to generation, from mother to daughter. Here she put the ring on 16-year-old Isabel's finger. "Take care of it, sweetheart. It contains the history of our family." Getting out of bed, Isabel began a methodical search of the bedroom. Maybe the ring had just fallen out of the jewelry box. She checked every corner, looked under furniture, went through every drawer. As she searched, she found other things: forgotten earrings, old letters, restaurant receipts. At the bottom of one of the drawers was a crumpled receipt from a jewelry store. Isabel unfolded the paper 2 weeks ago, cleaning and adjusting the ring size. The jeweler's handwriting was illegible, but the amount spoke of working on an expensive piece. Her phone rang, making her wince. Her mother's name popped up on the screen, as if she sensed her daughter needed support. "Mom?" Isabel's voice shook. "Honey, I just wanted to see how you were." The mother could hear the concern in her voice. "Are you doing okay?" Isabel wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but the words stuck in her throat. "Isabel?" Her mother sensed something wrong. "What's wrong?" "The ring, Mom," she finally said. "Grandmother's ring." There was a heavy silence in the receiver. "What's wrong with it?" Mother asked cautiously. "Ricardo. He gave it to another woman." Isabel heard her mother draw in air sharply. "Are you sure?" "I saw it. On her finger." Isabel sank to the floor, leaning against the wall. "On the airplane today." "Oh, honey," her mother was quiet. "Do you want me to come?" "No." Isabel shook her head, though her mother couldn't see it. "I have to figure this out on my own." After talking to her mother, she sat still for a long time, staring at one point. Scraps of memories flashed through her mind. Here was Ricardo admiring the ring at their engagement party. Here he was offering to store it in a safe deposit box, for safety. Here she was refusing, saying the ring should stay at home. The house phone rang, its shrill trill echoing through the empty apartment. Sophia's voice came over the answering machine. "Isabel, pick up the phone. I know you're home. Please don't do anything stupid." She didn't bother to pick up the phone. What stupid thing could she do? The worst had already happened. Her husband had given the family heirloom to his mistress. In the kitchen, she found Ricardo's cell phone, forgotten this morning. The screen was password protected, but she knew the combination the day of their wedding. Or was it no longer? Her fingers automatically dialed the familiar digits. The phone unlocked. Dozens of messages from K filled the screen. Isabel didn't bother to read them. She already knew what was there. Instead, she opened the gallery. Photos of Catalina, selfies of them together, shots of them in restaurants. And among them, a photo of a ring in a jewelry store with the caption, "Ready for a new life." A new life. Her grandmother's ring, a symbol of family history and tradition, was now part of someone else's story. A story of betrayal and lies. Isabel put the phone down on the table and looked at her watch. Ricardo was due back soon. What would she say to him? How would she look into the eyes of the man who had so easily betrayed not only her, but her family's memory? In the bedroom, she changed into a business suit, the same one she wore to important meetings. She gathered her hair into a tight bun and applied makeup. She would meet this challenge with dignity, just as her grandmother had taught her. Taking the empty jewelry box, Isabel placed it in her bag. She then pulled a small suitcase out of her closet and began to put her essentials into it. She didn't know if she would be coming home tonight, but she wanted to be ready for anything. The phone rang again, this time Victoria, followed by a message from Mauricio. If you need help, call anytime. Everyone seemed to know what was going on except for her, and all these months they'd been silent, pitying her. In the living room, she found her apartment papers. She'd gotten it from her grandmother, as well as the ring. Ricardo had never had any claim to it. At least it was an inheritance he couldn't give to another woman. Isabel looked at herself in the hallway mirror. From there, a stranger looked back at her, pale, with a determined look and tightly compressed lips. This woman was going to fight for her inheritance. As she left the apartment, Isabel looked back one last time at the pictures of them together on the walls. The happy moments captured on paper now seemed fake. How long had Ricardo played the role of loving husband? When had he decided he could handle her inheritance? In the elevator, she dialed the number of a cab. Her car had been left at the airport, but that didn't matter now. The important thing was to get to Ricardo's office. She knew his schedule. This was the time he usually held his daily staff meeting. Heavy clouds covered the sky, promising rain. Isabel lifted the collar of her coat as she waited for a cab at the entrance. A gust of wind mussed her perfect hair, but she didn't even notice it. All her thoughts were focused on the upcoming confrontation. The phone in her bag vibrated again. Sophia was still trying to contact her, but right now, Isabel didn't need advice or sympathy. She needed to get her ring back and put an end to this farce. The cab stopped outside the airport building. Isabel paid the driver and stepped out into the drizzling rain. She deliberately chose the main entrance instead of the service entrance. She didn't want to meet her co-workers right now. An empty jewelry box was in her bag, reminding her of the purpose of her visit. The guard at the entrance recognized her and gave her a friendly nod. She smiled back mechanically as she passed through the turnstile. The heels of her shoes beat a steady rhythm on the marble floor of the terminal. Several airport employees said hello to her, but she barely noticed them. The security office was in the administrative wing of the building. As she climbed the stairs, the elevator seemed too slow. Isabel mentally repeated what she was going to say. It had to be matter-of-fact, unemotional. Just give back what was rightfully hers. The hallway outside Ricardo's office was unusually quiet. Usually there were employees scurrying around, phones ringing, conversations going on. Now there was an almost ringing silence. Only from behind his office door came muffled voices. Isabel went to the door and raised her hand to knock. But something stopped her. Through the frosted glass she saw two silhouettes. One was definitely Ricardo's, the other was a woman's. They stood very close together. She placed her palm on the doorknob. At that moment the woman's voice, Catalina's voice, said something, and Ricardo's laughter rang out. That special soft laugh that used to be reserved only for her. Isabel opened the door abruptly. The first thing she saw was Ricardo's hands on Catalina's waist. The second was the ring, her ring, glistening on the woman's finger. They kissed, unaware of anything around them. At the sound of the door opening, both turned around. A look of horror mixed with guilt flashed across Ricardo's face. Catalina, on the other hand, didn't even try to pull away from him. "Isabel," Ricardo began, letting go of Catalina. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Her voice sounded surprisingly calm. "How my grandmother's ring ended up on your mistress's finger." Catalina looked at the ring defiantly. "Oh, so it's a family heirloom? Ricardo said he bought it especially for me." "Take it off." Isabel took a step forward. "Now." "What?" Catalina raised an eyebrow mockingly. "It's a gift from the man I love. I'm not going to take it off." Ricardo stood between them, shifting his gaze from one to the other. "Let's talk calmly." "Calmly?" Isabel opened her bag and pulled out a jewelry box. "This is where this ring should be. This is where it's been kept for 3 generations. My grandmother passed it down to me before she died." It would be a shame to keep such a beauty in a box. Catalina stroked the ring. At least it's wearable now. Isabel felt something inside her break. All the words she had prepared, all the calm arguments evaporated. Instead, she took a sharp step toward Catalina. Take it off. The ring. Or what? Catalina retreated behind Ricardo's back. What will you do? Isabel, please. Ricardo tried to take her hand. Let's discuss this at home. She pushed his hand away. Don't touch me. How could you? You knew what that ring meant to me. Iya, he stammered. I didn't think. Of course you didn't think. Catalina grinned. He's only thought about me for the last 6 months. That was the last straw. Isabel tossed aside her bag and jewelry box. In 2 steps she was at Catalina's side, pushing away Ricardo, who tried to stop her. Grabbing the hand of her husband's mistress, she tried to remove the ring. Catalina cried out and tried to break free, but Isabel held on tight. A struggle ensued. Ricardo tried to separate them but was elbowed in the chest and retreated. Somewhere in the hallway, anxious voices were heard. The door swung open. Several security officers stood on the threshold, but no one dared to intervene. At some point, Catalina lost her balance and fell, pulling Isabel with her. They rolled on the floor as they continued to struggle. Isabel felt only one thing, the metal of the ring beneath her fingers. A sharp tug, and the ring slipped from Catalina's finger. Isabel immediately recoiled, clutching the jewel in her hand. Breathing heavily, she rose to her feet. Catalina remained lying on the floor, holding her hand and screaming. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared. Ricardo rushed over to her, helping her up. "You're crazy!" Catalina shouted. "I'm going to file a report on you!" Isabel slowly slipped the ring onto her finger. It sat perfectly, as if it had never left its rightful place. "File it," she replied calmly. "At the same time, you can explain how you came into possession of a family heirloom you couldn't legally obtain." Sophia appeared in the doorway. Apparently someone had managed to summon her. "Isabel," Ricardo called out. "I'm sorry." She turned to him. "For what exactly? For cheating? For lying? Or for stealing my inheritance to give to her? I just wanted to make her feel good. And that's why you chose this ring, the only thing I inherited from my grandmother." Sophia walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "Let's get out of here." But Isabel wasn't done. She looked at Catalina, still clinging to Ricardo. "You know what the funny thing is? It wouldn't have brought you happiness anyway. In our family they say that this ring protects true love and punishes betrayal." "Those are just old fairy tales," Catalina snorted, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Perhaps." Isabel picked up her bag and jewelry box from the floor. "But I'd think if I were you, if he betrayed his wife so easily, what's to stop him from betraying you?" She turned to Ricardo. "I'm filing for divorce. I'll pick up my things tomorrow. You can leave your keys with the concierge." Turning around, she walked toward the exit. Sophia followed her. At the door, Isabel turned around one last time. "And yes, don't bother explaining to your co-workers what happened. From the looks on their faces, they already knew everything." Indeed, a small crowd of co-workers had gathered in the hallway. They parted in front of her, lowering their eyes. Some whispered words of encouragement, others simply remained silent. Only at the elevator did Isabel allow herself to exhale. Her hands trembled and her knees shook, but she held herself upright. Sophia stood silently by her side, making no attempt to start a conversation. As the elevator doors closed, Isabel looked at the ring. In the artificial light of the cabin, the sapphire seemed almost black, and the diamonds around it shimmered like tears. "Grandmother would be proud of you," Sophia said quietly. Isabel nodded, unable to utter a word. She had protected the family inheritance, but the price of that victory had been high. Her marriage, her trust, her quiet life. It all stayed there, in the office on the top floor. Sophia insisted on driving Isabel home. They were silent the whole way. Words seemed superfluous. The rain intensified, the drops drumming on the roof of the car, creating a monotonous noise that was strangely soothing. Isabel sat with her jewelry box bag clutched to her chest, occasionally running her finger over the ring as if making sure it had indeed returned to her. "Why don't you come to my place?" Sophia asked, stopping in the driveway. "You shouldn't be alone right now." Isabel shook her head. "No, I should be home. I need to get my things together, my papers. Then I'll come up with you." "Sophia." Isabel looked at her friend for the first time all the way up. "Thank you, but I need to be alone." "Really?" Sophia nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but if you need anything, call me anytime. Promise?" "Promise." The apartment was quiet and dark. Isabel didn't turn on the overhead light, only the small lamp in the hallway. Her reflection in the mirror looked strangely alien. Disheveled hair, pale face, wrinkled suit. There was a scratch on her cheek, probably from the fight with Catalina. She went into the bedroom and began methodically packing. Clothes, documents, photos. Everything was piled into a large suitcase. Jewelry, she decided to take everything, even the ones that had been given to Ricardo. Then she could sell them or give them to charity. In the bathroom, she gathered cosmetics and toiletries. Her gaze fell on Ricardo's shelf, his razors, his favorite perfume, his comb. Such familiar, homely things. Isabel turned away, clenching her teeth. In the kitchen, she made tea, strong with bergamot, the way her grandmother liked it. She sat down at the table, stroking the ring absently. I wonder if her grandmother knew that her favorite piece of jewelry would be the cause of such a scandal. The sound of the key turning in the lock made her wince. Ricardo entered quietly, as if afraid to frighten her away. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, hesitant to enter. "I thought you were staying with her." Isabel didn't turn to her husband. "Isabel." He took a step forward. "Let's talk." "About what? About how you stole my ring, or about how long you've been lying to me?" Ricardo sank heavily into the chair across from him. "I know what I did was terrible. I shouldn't have—" "Yes, you shouldn't have." She finally looked him in the eye. "But you did. Why this particular ring, Ricardo? You could have bought her any other." "She saw it on your hand at one of the corporate events. Said she'd never seen anything like it." His voice sounded muffled. "I wanted to give her a special gift." "Special?" Isabel grinned bitterly. "You stole a family heirloom to impress your mistress?" "I fell in love," he said simply. "For the first time in years, I felt alive." Those words hit harder than a slap. "What about me? Our marriage? 8 years together?" "You were always so busy flying," he spoke softly, but every word reverberated with pain. "We became just neighbors living under the same roof." "Is that why you decided to steal my ring?" Isabel clenched her cup so hard her knuckles turned white. "Was it revenge?" "No," he pitched forward. I wasn't thinking. Catalina wanted him so badly." "And what did you want, Ricardo? What do you want now?" He was silent, looking down at the table. Outside the window, the rain intensified, the drops pounding on the eaves like a metronome, counting down the seconds of their last conversation. "I love her," he finally said. "And she loves me." Isabel slowly removed the ring and placed it on the table between them. "Look at it," she said. "See the engraving on the inside? That's my grandparents' wedding date. They lived together for 52 years. When my grandmother handed me the ring, she said it brings happiness to those who are true to their love." Ricardo looked up. "You don't believe in those fairy tales, do you?" "I believe in fidelity, in honesty, in respect." She put the ring back on. "All the things you trampled on. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, and continued to do so every day you lied to me." Isabel stood up. "I've packed my things. I'll send for them tomorrow. Where will you go? That's not your concern anymore. She headed toward the kitchen exit but stopped in the doorway. You know what the worst part is? It's not the cheating or even the ring. It's that you betrayed not only me, but yourself. In the bedroom, she changed into comfortable clothes and gathered the things she needed for the night into a small bag. Ricardo didn't follow her. She could hear him pacing the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets. When she came out into the hallway with the bag, he was standing there leaning against the wall. "So that's it?" he asked. "Just like that?" "Just?" She shook her head. "No, Ricardo. You made it complicated every time you met her. Every time you lied to me. Every time you looked at the ring on her hand and decided not to give it back. I can fix this." A pleading note appeared in his voice. "No, you can't." She opened the front door. "Some things can't be fixed." At the landing, she turned around one last time. "I'll pick up the rest of my things tomorrow. Leave the keys with the concierge." "Wait." He took a step forward. "At least tell me where you're going to spend the night?" "With people who never betrayed me." She closed the door, cutting herself off from her past life. In the elevator, Isabel pulled out her phone and dialed Sophia's number. "Can I still sleep over?" "I've already made up the guest room." A smile could be heard in her friend's voice. Stepping out of the entryway, Isabel lifted her face to the rain. The cold drops mixed with the tears she had finally allowed herself to shed. She caught a cab and gave Sophia's address. All the way there, she stared at her reflection in the wet glass, at the ring back in its rightful place. 8 years of marriage were over, but the family jewel remained with her, a reminder that some values were worth fighting for. The first ray of sunlight through the curtains of Sophia's guest room woke Isabel before her alarm clock. For a few seconds she lay motionless, trying to realize where she was. An unfamiliar room, a strange bed, an unfamiliar silence. The reality of what was happening hit her in a wave. She wasn't going back to her and Ricardo's apartment. Soft footsteps outside the door suggested that Sophia was already awake. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the apartment. Isabel sat up on the bed, absently adjusting the ring on her finger. It felt heavier after yesterday, as if it had absorbed all the bitterness of what had happened. "Good morning." Sophia stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Honestly." Isabel accepted a cup. "Almost none at all. Been replaying yesterday in my head all night." Sophia sat down next to her on the bed. "That's normal. It takes time to realize things." "You know what's weird?" Isabel took a sip of hot coffee. "I don't feel broken, more like liberated." At that moment the phone rang. Victoria's name popped up on the screen. "Isabel, finally!" Her friend's voice sounded excited. "I've been up all night thinking about you. How are you?" "Alive." Isabel smiled weakly. "Thank you for worrying." "That's all the airport is talking about." Victoria lowered her voice. "Catalina has tendered her resignation." "That's how." Isabel felt a strange satisfaction at the news. After breakfast, Sophia offered to drive to pick up the rest of her things. They parked in front of a familiar driveway. The concierge, seeing Isabel, silently handed her an envelope with the keys. Ricardo had already left them as she had asked. Everything in the apartment was the same as it had been last night. Only on the kitchen table was a note written in familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry. I know this won't fix anything, but I had to say it." Isabel crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash can. She and Sophia methodically went around the rooms packing up their belongings. Isabel tried not to look at the pictures on the walls, not to linger on the little things that reminded them of their life together. The main thing was to take what she needed and leave. In the bedroom, she opened the closet where her things were kept. Clothes, shoes, bags, all neatly folded, hung on shoulders. How many times had she stood here in the morning picking out her outfit for work? How many times had Ricardo hugged her from behind, helping her zipper up her dress? Don't think about it, Sophia seemed to read her mind. Let's just pack everything we need. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Both women froze, but it turned out to be Mauricio. He had come to offer his help. I thought you might need strong arms, he said, shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot in the hallway. Thank you. Isabel thanked him sincerely. There really are some heavy boxes in there. With the three of them, the work went faster. Mauricio took care of the heavy stuff. Sophia packed dishes and books, and Isabel gathered documents and personal belongings. No one talked. Everyone was focused on their task. Around noon, another doorbell rang. This time it was Victoria, laden with bags of food. Thought you could use some refreshment. They had set up an impromptu picnic right on the living room floor among the boxes and suitcases. Victoria recounted the latest news from the airport. It turned out Ricardo had taken a vacation at his own expense, and no one knew when he'd be back. What about Catalina? Sophia asked. They say she flew to her parents in another city, Victoria shrugged. Apparently the scandal was beyond her. After lunch, they continued packing. Mauricio drove several times with boxes to Sophia's car. Isabel methodically checked every drawer, every closet. She didn't want to come back here again. Last of all, she went into Ricardo's office. There were hardly any of her things here, but she had to check. On the desk was their wedding picture. She took it without a second thought, not out of sentimentality, but because she didn't want to leave a piece of her past here. I think that's it, she said, looking around the empty rooms. Sophia put her arm around her shoulders. Are you sure you want to stay with me? We can look for an apartment for you. For now, yes. Isabel squeezed her friend's hand gratefully. I need time to decide what to do next. 6 months passed. The June morning was unusually fresh after the night's rain. Isabel stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, which she had bought 2 months ago, and adjusted her uniform tie with a familiar motion. The ring on her finger caught the first ray of sunlight and glistened warmly. A small, cozy apartment in a quiet part of town had become her real refuge. Everything here was organized to her taste. Light walls, minimalist furniture, lots of live plants. On the wall in the living room hung a picture of her grandmother, the same one from the box, only now in a large format and a beautiful frame. The phone beeped. A message from Sophia. See you at the briefing. There's news. Isabel smiled. After the divorce, her friendship with Sophia had grown even stronger. They often spent weekends together, going to the spa, having bachelorette parties with Victoria. In the hallway, Isabel paused for a moment at the mirror. She'd changed in the past 6 months, not outwardly, but inwardly. There was a new sparkle in her eyes, a confidence in every movement. Even the uniform sat somehow especially elegant. The cab was already waiting at the entrance. The driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, often took her to the airport and already knew all her habits. He turned on quiet classical music and didn't try to make conversation this early. The airport was filled with the usual morning excitement. As she walked through the service entrance, Isabel nodded to the new head of security. Ricardo had transferred to another airport right after the divorce. She had heard that he was living in another city with Catalina, but that information no longer stirred any emotions in her. A radiant Sophia met her in the break room. You won't believe this. I've been promoted to senior flight attendant supervisor. Congratulations. Isabel hugged her friend sincerely. You've earned that promotion. I'll have more paperwork now, Sophia sighed, fake sigh. But at the same time, the pay is higher. At that moment, Mauricio entered the room. He and Isabel had grown closer over the past few months, first just talking during breaks, then starting to eat lunch together between flights. He never rushed things, just was there for her, ready to be supportive at any moment. Good morning, ladies. His gaze lingered on Isabel a little longer than necessary. "Ready for your flight?" Victoria, who appeared next to him, was late as always. "Sorry, my alarm clock failed me." Some things never change, Sophia laughed, but there was no longer the same sternness in her voice. The briefing went quickly and clearly. Mauricio announced the itinerary, assigning duties. As everyone began to disperse, he spoke quietly to Isabel. "I have tickets to the opera next weekend. Would you care to accompany me?" She felt her heart sink. "I'd love to." Sophia, who was passing by, pretended not to have heard their conversation, but her satisfied smile said otherwise. Pre-flight preparations went on as usual. Isabel checked the cabin, noting every detail on her list. Her professionalism had grown even more over the months. She was fully committed to her work, and that didn't go unnoticed by her superiors. Passengers began to fill the cabin. Isabel greeted them with a genuine smile, helped them place their luggage, and answered their questions. One elderly couple in particular caught her eye. They were holding hands like teenagers in love. 50 years together, the man announced proudly, noticing her gaze. "And every day is like the first." Isabel helped them settle into their chairs, thinking about how true love really does exist. It's just that sometimes you have to go through pain and disappointment to realize what it should be. Before takeoff, Mauricio contacted the cabin. "Crew, prepare for takeoff." His voice, calm and confident, brought a smile to Isabel's face. She took her seat, buckled her seatbelt. The plane began to taxi onto the runway. Sophia, sitting next to her, leaned over to her. "You know, he's been in love with you for a long time, even before the whole Ricardo thing." "I know," Isabel replied quietly, "but I wasn't ready to see it then." The plane picked up speed and lifted off the ground. Isabel felt a familiar thrill. Every takeoff was like a small miracle to her. But now, there was something new added to that feeling, the anticipation of a future that no longer frightened her with its unknowns,